5 medical tests to avoid. After 70, they may harm more than help. Have you ever left a doctor's office feeling more confused than reassured? Maybe they handed you a list of tests, blood work, or screenings that seemed endless. And while it's natural to trust that more testing means better care, especially as we get older, sometimes too much medical attention can actually do more harm than good. Sounds surprising, doesn't it? I want to talk about something many people over 70 don't hear enough. After a certain age, there are some medical checkups and screenings that aren't just unnecessary. They might even put your health at risk. That's right. Not every test is right for everyone, and as we get older, our bodies need a different kind of care. It's not about ignoring health problems, but about focusing on what truly matters and skipping what doesn't. So if you're in your 70s or you love someone who is, this video is for you. We're going to walk through 5 medical tests that seniors over 70 might want to think twice about. These are tests that doctors often recommend automatically, but they may not always consider whether those tests are helpful or safe at this stage of life. And I'll explain why. Let's get started with the first one. Now, I know this is a sensitive topic because everyone wants to do what's best for their health, but understanding where modern medicine might go overboard is just as important as knowing when to take action. So, here we go. The first test that seniors over 70 may want to avoid is the colonoscopy. Now, don't get me wrong. Colonoscopy is a life-saving tool for many people in their 50s and 60s, helping to catch colon cancer early. But after 70, things change. Especially after 75 or 80, the risks of the procedure itself often outweigh the benefits. Why? Well, colonoscopy involves sedation, preparation with strong laxatives, and the risk of complications like bleeding or even perforation of the colon. And here's something else many folks aren't told. Colon cancer is typically slow-growing. If you've had clear colonoscopies in your 60s, there's a good chance you don't need another one in your 70s. Plus, the older you get, the longer it takes for any new polyps to develop into something serious. So the guidelines from places like the US Preventive Services Task Force now suggest that routine colonoscopy isn't necessary past a certain age. You can always talk to your doctor about less invasive options like stool-based tests if there's still a concern. But for many seniors, skipping that next colonoscopy might actually be the safer, smarter choice. Now let's move on to the second test, which might surprise you, the PSA test for prostate cancer. This is for the gentlemen out there. You might have been told that checking your PSA levels is an essential part of staying healthy. And for younger men, there's some truth to that. But after 70, especially 75, the picture changes. Elevated PSA levels can lead to a whole chain reaction: biopsies, treatments, surgery, all of which carry risks. And many of the prostate cancers found in older men grow so slowly that they would never have caused problems during your lifetime. Imagine going through surgery or radiation for something that wasn't even a threat. That's not the kind of situation anyone wants to find themselves in. Plus, those treatments can bring side effects like incontinence or sexual dysfunction, which can seriously impact your quality of life. That's why many experts now say that men over 70 should think carefully about whether they really want to keep getting PSA tests. It's about weighing peace of mind against the potential for unnecessary worry and harm. And remember, you can always have an open conversation with your healthcare provider. Just because a test is available doesn't mean it's automatically the right choice for you. Before we move on, I want to pause here for a moment and share a little story. My neighbor, Mr. Thomas, a spry 78-year-old, was once scheduled for a PSA test out of routine. But after chatting with his doctor and doing a little reading, he realized it wasn't really necessary for him anymore. Instead of spending his time worrying about medical numbers, he now spends it gardening and taking his grandkids to the park. That's the kind of balance we're talking about: healthcare that adds to your life, not complicates it. So we've talked about colonoscopies and PSA tests. Let's ease into the next topic, which is just as important and often overlooked. It's about understanding when some checkups are truly helpful and when they might just be adding extra stress. Stick with me as we continue exploring which tests may be worth skipping as you enjoy this chapter of life. Now, as we continue this conversation, I want to remind you, this isn't about ignoring your health. It's about choosing wisely. So many of us grew up in an era when more tests meant better care, right? But especially after 70, life's focus often shifts from adding years to adding good years, quality time with family, hobbies, peace of mind. That's why it's so important to talk about tests that may cause more harm than help. Let's keep going. Another medical checkup that may not be as necessary after 70 is the mammogram. This is specifically for the ladies. Now, before anyone gets upset, let me explain why. For women in their 40s, 50s, and even early 60s, regular mammograms can be a key tool in catching breast cancer early. But after 70, especially if you've never had any issues or have consistently clear results, it might be time to reassess. The thing is, as we age, the likelihood of developing an aggressive form of breast cancer decreases. At the same time, mammograms can pick up things that may look suspicious but turn out to be harmless. That can lead to follow-up tests, biopsies, and even unnecessary treatment, all of which carry risks. Think about the stress that comes with waiting for test results, or the discomfort and anxiety of further procedures that might not have been needed in the first place. I once spoke with a viewer, Eleanor, a lovely woman in her early 80s. She shared that after decades of yearly mammograms, her doctor finally suggested she could stop. Eleanor was a little nervous about it at first, but after learning the reasons behind the decision, she felt relieved. She told me how freeing it was not to have that yearly appointment looming over her. And she's not alone in that feeling. Now, just to be clear, this is very personal. Some women may still choose to continue mammograms after 70, and that's okay. But it's worth having an honest conversation with your doctor about whether it's really necessary, especially if you've never had breast cancer and don't have any high-risk factors. Trust me, there's power in understanding when routine isn't always best for you. That brings me to another checkup that might sound surprising. Bone density scans, also called DEXA scans. These tests are designed to check for osteoporosis, a condition that weakens bones and makes them more likely to break. It's a real concern for many seniors, especially women, and for good reason. But here's what many people don't realize. After a certain age, getting repeated bone density scans may not offer much useful information. If you've already been diagnosed with osteoporosis, you and your doctor likely have a plan in place. But if you're over 70 and haven't had issues, or if you've already been tested and the results were mild, continuing to get scanned every year or two might not change your care. Plus, bone density changes slowly. It doesn't shift dramatically overnight. Sometimes, these repeated tests lead to prescriptions for medications that come with their own risks, like bisphosphonates, which can cause digestive problems or even rare but serious side effects affecting the jaw or thigh bones. That's not to say treatment isn't valuable for some people, but if you've already been managing your bone health well with diet, exercise, and maybe vitamin D or calcium supplements, repeated scans may not be adding much to the picture. I had a chat not long ago with a gentleman named George. He's 74 and shared with me how his doctor used to schedule him for bone scans every year because, as George put it, that's just what they did. But after reviewing his results, barely changing from year to year, he and his doctor agreed to stop. George said it felt like taking something off his to-do list that wasn't really helping. And honestly, isn't it nice when you can simplify things a bit? So we've touched on colonoscopies, PSA tests, mammograms, and bone density scans. These are all things we often assume are part of staying healthy, but as you can see, It's not always that straightforward. It's really about being mindful. Medicine is evolving, and part of that evolution is realizing that one-size-fits-all approaches don't always make sense for older adults. Now, there's one more checkup I want to mention, and this one is especially tricky because it's so common. But before we get to that, let's just take a moment to reflect. Think about how many times in life we've done things simply because we were told to, not stopping to ask if they really made sense for us personally. Healthcare is no different. It's empowering to know that you can ask questions, weigh risks and benefits, and even say no when a test or treatment doesn't feel right. Let's continue now and dive into that final checkup that might not be as necessary as many believe. The last checkup I want to talk about is something most of us have done many times over the years: routine heart stress tests and imaging. Whether it's a treadmill test, a CT scan of the heart, or other types of screenings, these tests are often suggested even when there are no symptoms. Maybe your doctor mentioned it as part of a yearly checkup, or perhaps you heard about it from a friend who said, "Better safe than sorry." But here's the thing. After 70, especially if you're feeling well and not showing any signs of heart trouble, like chest pain or shortness of breath, routine heart stress tests might not offer much real benefit. In fact, they can sometimes lead to what's called a cascade of care. One small questionable result can lead to more invasive procedures like angiograms or even surgery that might not have been needed in the first place. The key word here is routine. If your doctor recommends these tests because you're having clear symptoms or there's a very specific reason, that's a different story. But if it's just because you hit a certain birthday or someone thinks it's time, that's worth a pause. At this stage of life, it's about focusing on care that truly supports how you feel day to day, not just numbers on a chart or images on a screen. I remember meeting a couple at a community health talk, Jack and Rita. Jack, who was 79 at the time, shared how a stress test he'd had, just in case, ended up leading to weeks of worry and an unnecessary heart catheterization. In the end, everything was fine, but he told me honestly he wished he'd never gone through all that in the first place. That's a real example of why thoughtful care matters so much. Now, as we've gone through these 5 checkups, colonoscopy, PSA test, mammogram, bone density scan, and routine heart stress tests, it's important to keep one thing in mind. Every person is different. Just because these tests may not be necessary for many seniors doesn't mean there aren't exceptions. What matters most is having open, honest conversations with your healthcare provider. Don't be afraid to ask, "Do I really need this test? Will it make a difference in my care or just add more worry?" Sometimes, choosing not to do something is just as powerful as choosing to take action. It's about protecting your peace of mind, your time, and your body from unnecessary risks. Let's quickly go over what we've covered today, without making it feel like a boring recap, I promise. We talked about how certain routine medical checkups may cause more harm than help after 70. From invasive tests like colonoscopies to stress-inducing screenings like heart tests, being mindful about what care you choose is key. And remember, the focus is always on living well, not just living long. Quality matters. If you've been through any of these experiences yourself, maybe you've said yes to a test that felt unnecessary, or maybe you've chosen to skip one, feel free to share your story in the comments. I'd really love to hear your thoughts because that kind of sharing helps others feel less alone in making these decisions. If this video helped you see things a little differently today, I'd truly appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me keep creating helpful content like this for you and for others who might be looking for guidance and reassurance. And just to leave you with a final thought, life after 70 can be rich, full, and joyful. It's a time to focus on what truly matters: family, hobbies, simple pleasures. Don't let unnecessary medical tests steal that away from you. Trust yourself, trust your body, and always seek care that lifts you up rather than weighs you down. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Here's to living your best life at any age, especially the wonderful years after 70.